Thailand's taxi mafia exposed corruption, control, and crackdown. Welcome back to The Truth Travels, the channel where we uncover the hidden forces that shape our world. In today's episode, we're diving deep into a story that's as dangerous as it is fascinating. The taxi mafia in Thailand. A shadowy network that's been quietly controlling the streets for decades, dictating prices, controlling territories, and making life very difficult for anyone who dares to stand in their way. This is not just about taxis. This is about power, corruption, and the unseen rules of the road. Roots of the taxi mafia. To understand the taxi mafia, we must go back to the late 1980s and early 1990s. Tourism was booming in Thailand. Phuket was transforming from a quiet fishing island into a global tourist hotspot. As hotels multiplied and visitors poured in, local transportation became a goldmine. At first, taxi driving was informal. Anyone with a car or minivan could pick up passengers. But competition was fierce, and in tourist areas, certain groups began banding together. They realized they could increase profits by controlling specific zones and pushing out anyone who wasn't part of their network. Soon, these informal groups evolved into organized cartels. They weren't just protecting drivers, they were fixing prices, controlling routes, and intimidating anyone who tried to compete. By the mid-1990s, the term taxi mafia became common among locals and expats. The word mafia wasn't an exaggeration. These groups operated with the discipline, hierarchy, and sometimes the violence of organized crime. How the system works. The taxi mafia thrives on control of territory, prices, and supply. If you land in Phuket International Airport and want to ride to Patong Beach, you'll notice there's no public competition. Independent drivers can't just pull up and offer you a cheaper ride. The airport is under the control of licensed taxi unions, which are often linked to mafia-like organizations. Drivers must be part of the network to work in these areas. They pay fees or protection money to keep their spot. These fees don't go into improving service, they go to the leadership of the group. Prices are deliberately kept high. In Phuket, for example, a short 20-minute trip can cost the same as a 2-hour bus ride in Bangkok. And if you try to negotiate or use ride-hailing apps like Grab, you might be told it's not allowed, or you'll face refusal. The mafia enforces this monopoly with intimidation. Drivers outside the system are threatened, their vehicles damaged, or they're blocked from entering certain zones. In extreme cases, violent altercations have been reported. Not just Phuket. While Phuket is the most famous example, taxi mafias exist across Thailand in Pattaya, Koh Samui, Chiang Mai, and even Bangkok. In Pattaya, motorcycle taxis and minivans have their own territories. Drivers will often form gangs to chase away competitors. Koh Samui has strict rules about who can pick up passengers at the ferry terminal, and those who break the rules can face threats. Bangkok is slightly different due to its size and the popularity of ride-hailing apps. But certain transport hubs like bus stations and tourist spots are still dominated by tightly controlled groups. Corruption and connections. How do these groups operate so openly? The answer is corruption and local influence. Taxi mafias often have ties to local politicians, police, and influential business people. In some cases, former officials or police officers lead these organizations. Protection money ensures that authorities turn a blind eye, and in return, the taxi groups deliver political support during elections. Occasional crackdowns do happen, but they are usually short-lived. Headlines appear about arrests, only for the same drivers to return weeks later. For the average tourist, this means there is little chance of finding a cheaper, competitive option in mafia-controlled zones. Ride-hailing wars. The arrival of ride-hailing apps like Grab and Bolt threatened the taxi mafia's power. Tourists and locals loved the convenience, transparent pricing, and competition. But in many areas, taxi groups fought back. They pressured local authorities to ban or restrict these services. Grab drivers have been threatened, chased, or blocked from entering key locations. In Phuket, the situation became so tense that the government had to negotiate peace agreements between Grab drivers and taxi unions, though even today, friction remains. Impact on tourism. Thailand's taxi mafia has damaged the country's tourism image. On travel forums, stories abound of tourists being overcharged, harassed, or stranded for refusing inflated fares. Some tourists have sworn off returning to certain destinations because of transportation headaches. This is more than a travel inconvenience. It's an economic issue. When visitors feel exploited, they spend less, stay shorter, and may never return. Government responses. Over the years, various Thai governments have promised to crack down on taxi mafias. Some successes have been made, such as introducing more regulated taxi stands and allowing ride-hailing in certain areas. But the deep-rooted nature of these networks, combined with local influence and economic dependency on the system, makes real reform difficult. The future of taxi mafias. The future depends on technology, tourism trends, and political will. If tourists increasingly demand app-based rides, and if public pressure grows, the government may be forced to act more decisively. Some younger drivers are already breaking away from the old system, choosing to work for apps instead of unions. But as long as the taxi mafia controls key transport hubs, the struggle will continue. How the taxi mafia operates. The taxi mafia works in a highly organized structure. Think of it as a pyramid. At the top are the power brokers, sometimes business owners, sometimes politicians, sometimes even members of law enforcement. These individuals don't usually drive taxis themselves. They control the permits, the routes, and the parking spots. Beneath them are the enforcers. Their job is to make sure everyone follows the rules. These are the people who might intimidate or even attack drivers who step out of line. At the bottom are the drivers themselves. Many are just trying to make a living, but they're forced into paying daily or monthly fees to operate. These fees can be extremely high, cutting into their already small earnings. And if they refuse, well, let's just say their car might mysteriously get damaged overnight. Why tourists notice the problem? Tourists are often the first to spot something strange about Thailand's taxi situation. You hail a cab and suddenly the driver refuses to turn on the meter. Instead, he offers a special price that's 2 or 3 times the normal fare. This isn't just bad luck. It's part of a system. Drivers in certain areas, especially near airports, tourist attractions, and hotels, have agreements to charge fixed, inflated rates. The alternative is facing punishment from the network. In Phuket, for example, certain beach areas are controlled by specific taxi groups. If you try to take a ride outside of the group's rules, your driver risks being blocked from future pickups in that area. Some tourists have even been threatened for refusing to pay. The role of corruption. One reason the taxi mafia has been so difficult to dismantle is corruption. Taxi cooperatives and their leaders often have strong ties to local politicians and police. Some officials turn a blind eye to illegal practices because they receive bribes or political support in return. This creates a cycle where no one at the top has any incentive to crack down on the problem. Even when the government announces reforms, enforcement is patchy and the rules often vanish after a few months. The impact on locals. While tourists face overpriced fares, locals feel the impact in a different way. Many Thais rely on taxis, motorbike taxis, or tuk-tuks to get around. But when a mafia controls the territory, competition disappears. That means prices stay high and service quality doesn't improve. Honest drivers who might want to charge fair rates are pushed out or pressured into joining the system. In some rural areas and islands, the problem is even worse. Public transport options are limited and locals are completely dependent on these controlled taxi networks. This can make basic travel expensive and inconvenient. Technology and disruption. In the last decade, ride-hailing apps like Grab and Bolt have challenged the taxi mafia's dominance. These apps offer cheaper prices, transparent booking and tracking features, but the response from the taxi mafia has been fierce. In some cities, app-based drivers have been harassed, attacked, or blocked from entering certain areas. Protests by traditional taxi groups have led to temporary bans or heavy restrictions on ride-hailing apps in different provinces. This is a battle between the old guard and new technology, and it's still unfolding today. Government attempts at reform. The Thai government has made several attempts to fix the problem, including stricter licensing rules, requiring all taxis to use meters and increasing penalties for overcharging. In 2014, there was a crackdown in Phuket that briefly reduced mafia activity. But without consistent enforcement, the old habits quickly returned. Some reform advocates believe the only way to break the taxi mafia's grip is through complete transparency in licensing and fare systems. Others say public transport expansion could reduce reliance on taxis altogether. Stories from the ground. Real stories bring the problem into sharp focus. One tourist in Phuket reported being surrounded by several drivers after she insisted on using the meter. She was told she could either pay the inflated price or walk back several kilometers in the heat. Another driver in Bangkok explained that he pays 500 baht a day just for the right to work in a certain hotel area. That's before he even earns a single baht for himself. These personal accounts paint a picture of a system where intimidation and greed outweigh fairness and service. Why it matters. The taxi mafia is not just a local annoyance. It's a symptom of deeper issues in governance, law enforcement, and economic opportunity. As long as power remains concentrated in the hands of a few and corruption goes unchecked, this problem will persist. The situation affects tourism, Thailand's international image, and the livelihoods of countless drivers and citizens. It's a story about roads, but it's really a story about power. So the next time you're in Thailand and step into a taxi, remember that the ride might be taking you through more than just traffic. You're traveling through a web of influence, money, and silent rules that have shaped this country's streets for decades. Here at The Truth Travels, we believe that understanding these hidden systems is the first step toward change. Stay curious, stay informed, and as always, travel safely.